Hello guys, today let's talk about Eloquent and seeders. And based on one example, I want to show you two things. First, that seeders can be quite complex, but also how we can optimize them to run fewer SQL queries under the hood. So the example comes from Firefly 3 open source project where they have exchange rate seeder like this. Pretty complex seeder, as opposite to our typical, I would say, seeders where you can have method run with just like user factory create records or something factory create. This is a typical seeder for specific model. In this case, they decided to go for more logic. Get the users, get the config data, and then for each of currency rate, check something, and then for each of the user, check if the user already has the rate in the database. If not, then they add the rate. And all of those are private functions in the same seeder class. So this is exactly what I wanted to show in kind of this first part of this video, is that seeder is a typical PHP class. So you can have private methods, variables, more logic. In this case, it reminds me more of an artisan command or job or something like that, but it can be in the seeder. So that's my first thought, and this is what I wanted to shoot the video about. But then I noticed that this can be actually optimized on Eloquent level. So I asked my colleague Narius to recreate that project, only this part of the project, not the full Firefly. So locally I have the same seeder, almost identical, with just the models that we need. The models that are actually touched. So user, same methods of hasRate, which have transaction currency and exchange rate. So in the user model, we have a relationship of currency exchange rates like this. And if we run that seeder with PHP Artisan DB seed specifying that specific class, and if we look at Laravel Telescope, which we have installed in this project, we have so many queries. Load older entries and even more queries here. So rough number is about 70, but it doesn't matter that much. It's just too many of repeating queries. We're using Laravel Telescope here instead of debug bar because, well, there's no debug bar in artisan commands here. So yeah, let's trace one by one. Select count from users and then select from users. They come from these two queries. And this is the first thing, kind of a no-brainer to optimize. So in this video, we will do step-by-step kind of optimization of this run method. So instead of doing count and get twice, we can do user get here or user all, I prefer in this case, and have users here. And then here, instead of checking the count, we can check immediately users is empty, and then we don't need that anymore. Good. So one query instead of two queries. Then next, we get the transaction currencies by some codes. And if we click any of those, we have the place of line 53, which is down below this one. So we're getting currency one by one. Where is that happening? Here. For each rates from the config, we get currency individually. And those rates come from the config, which is this. In the config, we have rates for currencies. So we're doing a query to the database for each of the currency. That's inefficient. So instead of calling this get currency one by one, we created two separate methods. First, get currencies, one called to the database, getting that into collections, and then rejecting empty currencies on the collection level instead of doing this loop here. So instead of building the usable array, we actually have that immediately in here, get currencies, and we don't need this loop at all anymore. Also on top there was this code, so getting the euro and checking if the euro even exists. So instead we're doing that euro check a bit later after we get all the currencies, again to avoid duplication of calling to the database. We'll get that get euro currency, another private method, but that deals with collection, not with database query anymore. And yeah, you can see a few weird operations with array merge and collections. It's just to have the same format of data as it used to be. In this video, I will not focus on that. I will focus on minimizing the SQL queries. So now here we have for each of the users, and instead of usable, we have currencies here from the method of get currencies. And then a few changes needed here. So euro and rate format is different. So we have euro ID and also ID here, and rate ID instead of 0. That makes it actually even more readable, and rate, actual rate from the database. And then instead of having hasRate and addRate doing database operations like this. So has rate, one database query. Add rate, another database query. In the telescope, this is exactly what is happening. As you can see, select count from aggregate and then insert. Select, insert for each currency rate individually. So why don't we do that in the collection as well, or array, and then perform one insert operation at the end. So first we need to understand that we're dealing with user currency exchange rates relationship. So user has many rates, and we need to load them up front while we're doing user all. Here, eager loading, then we'll get those into collection. So instead of doing user all, we have this user with relations get. And then here, instead of having user passed as a parameter, let's pass only the rates from that user. So then has rate and add rate will work not with user and other parameters, but instead we change it to this. So this is the old version, this is the new version. We pass the collection, we pass specific rates instead of the full objects, and then we're working with currency exchange with the collection. We check if it contains the data with that condition or not. So that's has rate. And then add rate, we don't add the rate to the database immediately. The new version is this, add rate to this rates. And we specify those rates as protected or private property of the same seeder. So we collect those rates one by one into that collection. So we can remove that older version and we have add rate. Now, when we're calling those functions here, instead of has rate for user, we're passing now currency exchange rates for specific user. We can do it like this. And this is where we get to the final actually operation of inserting all of that. So after all those for each loops, we should have this rates, this one filled in. So all we need to do at the very end is this one insert operation for everything that needs to be inserted to the database. And now if we clear the telescope entries and we rerun the seeder command, seeding database again, and we look at our telescope, we have only 4 queries in total to the database, not 70 something, but just 4. One select for users, one select for all the rates for those users, then one select for all the currencies, and then one insert for all the processed data. And in the database we have this, so user from currency ID, rate, and stuff like that. So we didn't really break anything, we just optimized the amount of queries. So yeah, a bit longer video, but optimization of real Eloquent query project. What do you think? Maybe you would have done something differently? Let's discuss in the comments below. And if you want more tips about Eloquent and optimization, I often mention my courses from LaravelDaily.com, so if you just search for Eloquent on that page, there's Eloquent Expert Level. There's older version of that same course for Laravel 9 and also better Eloquent performance. I will link all of those in the description below. That's it for this time and see you guys in other videos.